Thanks for inviting me to be here. I'm excited. So I don't think I have to do any other chatting, right? Do you want me to say anything, or should I just start painting? I don't know what people normally do. So as she was saying, I do a lot of plein air painting as well as painting in my studio. I find that as a landscape painter, the plein air painting for me is the education aspect. That's where I'm really learning and getting ideas. Like when I feel like I'm hitting a wall with my work, I feel like this is where I know I need to go back outside and learn from nature again and see what nature is offering to me, because I just feel like you can kind of recreate a lot from memory and things like that, but getting new ideas for me, a lot of that comes from just getting out and painting from life. So, so tonight I'm gonna do a demo. I don't know if I'll finish this painting. It's a big painting. I typically will work in layers anyway, so I'll often do a beginning of a piece, set it aside, and come back to it later. So I do work in layers a lot when I'm working in my studio. Even when I do plein air work, I'll bring it back in my studio sometimes and still work into it. So I like that indirect method of painting a lot of the time. I like the layers that it brings and the interest that it brings to the surface. So if I do decide I'm at a point where I'm gonna stop on this one, I have other panels. I could do some other smaller demos for you as well if we have time. I do tend to paint fast. I talk fast. I do all the things fast. So if you have any questions, please let me know. I'm gonna be working from a reference photo, but I've doctored it up. You probably can't see it because it's not a very bright screen, and I don't know where it went. So hold on one second. And so it's just this, it's a painting from Portsmouth, Rhode Island, actually. So it was just a rainy day that I was driving down past some farms, and I love the view of the cows with the rolling hills going back, and I put some of those clouds shapes in, but so I kind of doctored the photo up a little bit to match more what I wanted the composition to be. So I'll talk a little bit about composition as I'm going, but for me, I know, right? I move them myself. You can do whatever you want as an artist. I love it. For me, the composition is the first thing that I feel like everybody sees when they see a painting. Sometimes we think we're seeing the color and the subject first, but really we're seeing the composition before we see anything else. And so I think for me, if I can get the design right in my work and I can get the values accurate, then the rest can you can kind of play around with the rest of it as you go. But I kind of feel like I have to go loose in the beginning to kind of mark out and map out my composition so that I can really feel good about that before I really go into creating more layers and things like that. So often when I'm beginning a painting, I will try to keep it loose and thinner. I don't necessarily thin it out a ton all the time, but if I am gonna thin it out at the beginning, I'm just using Gamsol right now. And I'm not really trying to get accurate colors per se. I'm just working more at value, shapes, things like that, so that I can kind of just get a visual of where the shapes are going to be and how I want them to feel in the painting and how they interact with each other. So, and I want to keep in mind the ratios. So in the photo, I might stick with the way that it's cut kind of more or less in half with the sky and the land, but I might also want to do more sky. So I'll kind of just play around with that as I'm putting everything in. So, yeah, this is, so the colors that I have are titanium white, Naples yellow, cadmium orange, ultramarine blue, cerulean blue, and then my earth tones, yellow ochre, burnt umber, and burnt sienna. So right now I'm really just working with burnt umber, ultramarine blue, maybe a little bit of cad yellow and white, and maybe a few other ones. maybe all of them mixed in, I don't know. And so I'm just kind of trying to get some of those values laid in.
Now it looks like you smudged colors from the very beginning, was that used to be a white
Oh,
panel?
this, yeah, it was white, and so I've just toned it with, it was probably just leftover paint a little bit, but if I'm doing it, often it's like burnt sienna, just thinned out, and then just rubbed in. Just like a mid-tone, a neutral, kind of a more neutral mid-tone. This is kind of warm, but I tend to paint a lot of cool paintings, as you can see. And so that warm undertone is nice for that, I think. Just it kind of helps to balance out those cool tones, I guess, that are in there. So. And please feel free to ask any questions, because I might not be thinking about what you're thinking about or what you're wanting to know. And so typically on this size of a panel, I would probably use a bigger brush, but this is all I brought, so this is what we're getting. Just so that you can kind of like work into the canvas kind of all at once. I like to build up a painting more or less all together and not necessarily work and focus on just one area at a time. It helps me to visualize what is happening a little bit better. So right now I'm mixing some of these greens with ultramarine blue, cadmium yellow. That's kind of this base color here, but as I'm working back, it will tend to get cooler, especially since the local color is the same for all of those greens more or less, and so it'll be a little cooler, maybe a little lighter. I mean, it's pretty subtle with this view, but it's still a little bit of a difference. And I'm just looking at big shapes on this. I'm not trying to work out any of the details at this point. I might be trying to give a suggestion of where I want to be putting the tree shapes and things like that, but I'm not overly worried about that right now. This brush is also falling apart. I have so many little, at the end it'll be just a little like, a sad little speck of what it was when I started. All right, so.
Same palette, like every time you paint?
Of colors? I have typically, yeah. I've been using just this limited palette for so many years. I think it's it just makes it easier to know how to get to the colors that I want to use and things like that. It helps me just paint a little faster because of that, I think. So that helps me. All right, I gotta give up that brush, sorry, that's a disaster. It's falling apart. And so then I'll go into the sky here to just, sorry, I have so many little little strands. It's okay. It gives it character, right? And so I'm gonna go in with kind of the bigger shapes first before I go in with the background, just to mark out where I wanna put these shapes. And again, I'm not really being super technical about edges or anything at this stage. I'm just trying to put in shapes, kind of get a semblance of the values that I'm looking for. Often when I'm painting, I'm kind of thinking of the overall mood that I want a painting to have, rather than
What did you just say, the overall?
mood of a piece, rather than having it be all about the subject matter, or I don't know. I'm just thinking a lot about the mood that I want it to kind of evoke, I guess. And so I'm kind of thinking about that as I'm doing. And I'm not necessarily going to be beholden to what I've done here, but I like the idea as I put it down and the feeling of it, the movement, I guess, in the sky and that kind of thing. So the nice thing about painting in your studio all alone is that you can always tell yourself, nobody ever has to see this, it's fine. And then you come out and do it. I know. And then joke's on me. But it's good. It's good practice anyway, right? And then I might come in and just kind of carve out some of those negative shapes. And like I said before, I'm not trying to solidify anything where it's going to be forever. I could even at this stage still move like the entire horizon line, you know. I just kind of like to lay everything in and just get a feeling for where the shapes are and where I want them to land in the painting. And this is just kind of like a slate gray made out of ultramarine blue, white, Naples yellow a little bit, and just kind of a mixture of everything else that was already here on my palette.
And how did you get that gray?
So ultramarine blue, Naples yellow, white, and kind of a mixture of everything else that was already on there. I'm a really messy painter, so I honestly probably, like, you can get back to the colors again, but only because there's like some trial and error involved, you know. There's no formula for me. I mean, other than just knowing that this is going to make that color, that kind of thing. But I'm not necessarily writing this down, you know, in between sessions of painting and like trying to match things or anything like that. I feel like, at least for the kind of work that I'm most drawn to and that I'm kind of most interested in making, I'm more interested in, I don't know, the interplay of the colors and the nuance of it. And I'm not necessarily trying to get anything hyper realistic, you know, so. And so here, I'm just gonna kind of come in with my palette knife and just kind of knock back texture and anything that's kind of built up on the painting. I tend to do this, at least in the early stages, quite a lot because it helps me to not get too precious about the edges that I've put down, knowing that they're not going to be there forever anyway, and it's not the, you know, the last word on this painting. So I like to do that. It helps me to feel like I'm working again with like just, you know, that pure texture of the canvas, that I'm not overly worried about where things were. And then as I'm looking at the reference, there's like certain things I like about it that I want to put into this piece. Like for instance, I mean, you might not all be able to see it, but in the reference, like, there it goes. Of course. Like it kind of comes up in the center, and then like I kind of like the movement there in the land, and here it's kind of the opposite. So I think I want to work that into it a little bit more. So that's just something, as I'm looking at it compositionally, I think will help the piece a little bit. So.
How much did you manipulate? You said that you
Yeah.
fixed up the photo.
So there was like some stuff in the foreground here, like some machinery and stuff. So I just kind of like went over that I just went into like the paint program actually on the computer. So just kind of like went over that. And then I kind of just kind of simplified some of the shapes, I guess, so that they didn't feel so scattered, and maybe brought, so for instance, like one, something I think you'll notice in my work a lot, but also something that's aesthetically pleasing in a composition is when you mask your values a little bit more. So, you know, you'll be looking out at a beautiful view, and sometimes you're tempted to just want to paint it exactly how you see it, you know, everything that you see, because it's beautiful, and you're looking at it, and you're thinking, it's beautiful, I could paint that, and it would be beautiful. But the problem is, like, there's this one tree here, and then there's this shape over here. And if you're putting all of that in just as you see it, sometimes it's not as pleasing to the eye in a standalone work because you're jumping around too much, maybe. And so if you can mask those value shapes together a little bit more. So, for instance, something I'll have students do sometimes is take a photo and then cut it up into like 4 basic shapes. Like, how can you break this painting down into 4 shapes, you know, or 5 shapes or something? And that way it helps you to really simplify the design, I guess, so that you can really see what you're working with. And that can kind of help, I don't know, help train your eye a little bit to see more simplified, I guess, a little bit. And sometimes it's funny how it doesn't seem like it should make that big of a difference. You know, it's just like one little thing here and there, but sometimes that is the thing that changes your whole painting. It, you know, just one kind of mark that you make or one alteration that you do.
So do you usually take a photo and then do the painting later, or do you actually plein air?
Yeah,
Paint outside?
Yeah, I paint outside a lot. I actually hardly ever paint from a photograph. But like recently I've done it a little bit more than I used to. And I'm kind of seeing some things I like about that. But I think for a long time for me, the best practice was not necessarily, I had nothing against painting from photographs per se, but I just felt like I was learning a lot more by not doing that. And I think a photograph, if you don't have the experience of painting from life and you're only painting from photographs, it's very deceiving. The photograph is very inaccurate and you're not gonna get the same perspective as a big one. You don't get perspective at all in a photograph. So for instance, you'll be out and you'll think this is such a beautiful view and I want to paint that when I go home, and you take a picture of it and then you bring it home and you're like, what did I even like about that view? It's so ugly in this picture because it's so flat, and then so you're not getting that perspective anymore. So often, even when I'm out in person, if I can't paint, or maybe I am painting but I can't do all the views, I can't paint like 10 paintings, I'll get my sketchbook out and sketch, because the sketch will give me better perspective than my photograph will, because I can put in leading lines and I can kind of indicate things a little bit better in a sketch. And so that's a really big tool for me to use. So I think for me in the beginning, when I was really kind of trying to get, I don't know, just improving myself with my landscape painting, it was really important for me to not get hung up on painting from photographs too much, because I felt like it was kind of a false teacher, you know? It wasn't really as effective for me. So that's just something that I noticed, I guess. All right, I gotta get back into the foreground because the colors are all garish and choppy and stuff, so I want to go back into that. So like I said before, I'm kind of moving around a painting a lot when I'm working. I'm not trying to focus on just one spot and perfect it, because then you're gonna run into having it, when you go into other areas, you're gonna realize, oh, well, that throws the balance off in this spot, and now I have to move that. And so I don't wanna really like finalize anything per se as I'm going along until I really know that it feels right, you know, that it feels like this is exactly where I want all those shapes to be. And then I feel like I can go in a little bit more with some details. And that just goes with like the loose quality that I want to have in my work. Everybody's, obviously their style and what they're wanting to express is going to be different, but that's important to me, to kind of have I guess the impression of something. And so here I'm still just looking at like overall shapes, not trying to get too hung up on like all the little details. And even those cows, like I might throw those in at some point, but it would probably be at the very end. I liked the cows. That was like the thing I kind of liked the most about it. It kind of leads you into the whole view, but and then another thing too, and this is true painting plein air or painting from a reference, that at some point you have to stop looking at your reference and look at your work. Like I'm doing a figure drawing class right now, and that doesn't feel true with figure drawing. Like the best rule of thumb there is never like don't take your eye off of your subject. But it's very different painting the landscape than painting the figure. There's a lot of differences there. So I think for me with the landscape, I'm not trying to necessarily get a likeness, and so I think for me at some point I have to stop looking at my reference, and maybe I can refer to it at times, but I need to look at what my painting needs more so than what's the reference telling me. The reference for me is a starting point, and then also like just a reference point, you know, to like go back to over time as I'm working, but not necessarily, I don't want to be beholden to that to tell me what to do, because it's not going to tell me what to do. And it might be wrong half the time anyway. So I need to go into my painting itself and kind of like squint at it or step away or just kind of like see what I feel like it might need, you know? And so that's kind of where your own artistic voice comes into play, I guess. And I'm like super haphazard about painting. I don't know. I don't really have like a real method per se, which gets me in big trouble half the time, but.
While you're painting, can you talk about like how you progressed through learning about how to paint or your process for learning? Like, did you go to school for this? Were you always really adept at that?
Yeah. So I did not study art in school. I studied archaeology and like languages and stuff. I was gonna go live in Egypt. That was my big dream. But yeah, I didn't go to art school, didn't study art. The last art class I ever took was in high school. But I did always love art. I had never really painted with oils or anything. And so it was not until probably 2007, and I had a good friend that I knew that had gone to art school, and she was trying to transition to become a full-time artist. And so I went to an open house of hers, and I walked out of there and I looked at my husband and I said, that's what I want to do. And so I went out and just bought like, cheap stuff at Michael's, I think probably, and just started painting with oils and had no idea what I was doing. It was like the day where I didn't know what YouTube was, I don't think even at that point. So I was like going to the library and checking out books and stumbled on some really high quality, good stuff, like just all the books that are out there that you can read, and just started learning that way. I hadn't taken a class, and I didn't really know what to be looking at. I didn't know about artists, like contemporary artists, I only knew a little bit about art history, but not much about that. And I was most drawn to like the texture of the paint on the paintings that I saw in her home, and I was like, that's what I want to do. I just want to work with that material. And so, yeah, I just started working. I actually started working from photographs initially because that's all I really knew about. I didn't really understand plein air painting or that concept, but it was probably a few years into that of just kind of playing around with it on my own that I realized that you can go outside and paint. Actually, it was one day I was driving home from the store or something, and we had our oldest son. He was still in a car seat, like carrying up and down the stairs, so still really little. And I remember seeing these clouds as we were driving home from the store, and I was mesmerized, and I was like, oh my gosh, I want to paint that. So I ran in the house, didn't even take him out of the car seat, just like, he's like asleep, just sitting there in his car seat, and I'm just like painting on my little like easel that I had in our living room or something, and like, I don't know, I think for me that was like a turning point because I was like, I got this bug of like, I could go out and paint stuff like as I see it, and so then I started doing that, and so I think for me, once I started plein air painting, then I felt like I progressed much more rapidly and I learned a lot quicker. But it was just a lot of painting and a lot of trial and error. And I never studied with anyone. I never went to, it's not a source of pride or anything, but I had never taken a workshop. I have still never taken a landscape painting workshop. But I feel like I've learned a lot from other artists. So even though I haven't necessarily pursued it formally, like I've learned a lot by painting with other artists, associating with them, and just hearing what they say and watching them paint, that kind of thing. So I definitely feel like that experience is really invaluable, but also just looking at a lot of art, I think has been a really big deal for me. But I think the number one thing that I would say that when people ask that question is just painting from life has been my best teacher. I don't know, and another thing I guess I think about too a lot is, sometimes I'll see somebody do something in their art and I'm like, I want to try that. And I feel like maybe we all do that as artists, but I think the difference is like, then just do it. Then just go to your easel and see if you can paint that thing, And so, I don't know, I think I've always just kind of been that way as a person. Just like false confidence, you know? I'm like, I could do it, I could do it. And so I just do it, I just go try. It doesn't mean I do it well or anything, but it pushes me to try new things, I guess, and to not stay stuck in what I've always been doing or what I felt like I was kind of getting proficient at. And so I think for me it's, because initially when I was painting, I was really afraid of movement in a composition. I felt like, oh, the flat horizon, the sky, the land, we can do that. You know, I can work with that. Until I realized I got bored with that. And I was like, okay, now I should really try to paint something else that I see, you know? So then I would work into some other idea. I would work some other element into it. So I just think that's so important to try, you know, just to like give it a try and try to see in a new way, and that kind of thing. So like, I think for me, that has been probably my best teacher.
You are plein air painting. How do you deal with the changing light?
So for me, well, one way to avoid too much of that problem is paint small, so you can paint quicker. For plein air painting, at least, I think that can be pretty helpful. But I think also something, and people ask us a lot about clouds, because I paint a lot of clouds and skies. That's kind of like when I started painting, and I was painting from reference photos that I had taken pictures when I lived in the Netherlands, and I had all these photos from that time, and there were so many sky photographs, and so I was trying to paint all these clouds, and they were like terrible, you know, they looked like rocks in the sky, they were like awful. But I was like passionate about that, and I really wanted to get good at that. And so people ask that a lot, like, how are you painting clouds? They're always moving and changing. And so for me, that's okay, because it means that I can move things around as it's changing outside, and that actually creates movement in the painting, which I think is a good thing. So not being afraid, especially with oil painting, this is a true principle that you can like move things around, you know, you scrape it back, you paint over it, whatever. But I think also, if there is a shape that I really want to capture, like I'm seeing something that I really want that in my painting, and I know it's gonna change, then I'll sketch it or I'll take a picture of it, and then you can kind of go back to it. If that's really the shapes that you want playing in your piece, then you can implement that, you know. But I think for me, like sketching is a really big part of that, like just putting it down in a sketch, and then I can go back to it. And then with the changing light, that's okay with me too. I guess to me, a lot of that is just learning to paint quick enough to capture some of that. And not, like, so a lot of these smaller pieces up here are just plein air studies. So they're really small on paper. And sometimes that's what I'll do. If it's like an element that I know is gonna change rapidly, then I'll just get out a piece of paper from my sketchbook and just paint on that really quick. Just those very simple basic shapes, like a 2 or 3 minute thing. And then I can use that to help me with the painting I'm working on, you know. So if it's bigger, you know. So those are some ideas, I guess, maybe. All right.
Erin, I heard you were talking, you and I early,
Uh-huh.
and we were talking about composition.
Yes.
And I was really interested in the fact that you said basically about it feeling right.
Yeah.
Would you be able to talk to, you know, we have some people here who are painters, but they don't get to paint that often.
Yeah.
And they would, you know, just like to hear from someone who does paint a lot about composition. That's one of the main things.
Yeah. Like I said before, it is like, I think it's the first thing we see when we look at a painting. And so, and a lot of composition is more or less going to be like the overall feeling of the painting, but there's very little things that can affect it, you know, that can affect the balance and things like that. So sometimes I'll have people say, what does this painting need? It needs something else. And it's, you know, maybe it feels off in some way and they can't figure out why. And sometimes it's a perspective issue. Sometimes it's, you know, there's lots of things that can be going on. But if it's not really any of those things, sometimes it's just placement of the shapes, you know, and it might just not feel balanced, or it might not, it feels too static, or the values aren't quite right, and so you can't read the composition the way that you want to. You know, for instance, like as things get further back in the distance, they might become lighter in value, that kind of thing. So it can play with, there's a lot of elements at play, but I I don't know. I like when I say it feels right. Like it is a hard thing to teach composition. I just don't think it's. There's some principles of composition that apply to painting, but like with anything, like those rules they're not always true all the time, in every situation. So, and I don't think in terms of composition. I shouldn't say that. I think about composition as I'm painting all the time. But I'm not thinking about like, is this a circular composition? Is it an S composition? I'm not thinking about it in those terms, but it's more, for me, it's more a matter of like, does it feel balanced? Like, is there enough weight in certain areas to create balance, but also is there movement throughout the piece? Like for instance, something that I've seen a lot of my students have done is like, for instance, if they were painting these clouds, they would put all the clouds on the painting. And they wouldn't realize that like they should be going off the painting in some areas, or you know what I mean? So then I'm like, well, maybe that's the problem, is it's too much like a little picture perfect situation, rather than a snapshot of like a bigger picture. So trying to keep that in mind, that everything should be moving off in all the directions, and that can help the eye move around. So also, for instance, it's obviously this isn't even finished compositionally for me, and I'm not quite there yet, but I might feel like as I'm going along, like you'll see I haven't even finished the spot because it's a problem area for me right now because I can't tell I just can't tell what I'm doing with it yet, so I'm still trying to play with that. But, I have this shape here, so like if maybe in the end I'll take that off or I won't, I don't know, but there's gonna be something going on where this is kind of coming up and out, and so I'm gonna wanna have something that brings me back in. And so I guess I'm not really thinking like literally about it, but I'm feeling that way about it, so I'm like, okay, well, I'm gonna have to have something that brings me back in. It might be something with the values, it might be something with a shape, it might be, even this has to be changed so that there's more, so it's not so much like that all the way up. I mean, I'm gonna have to move things. So for me, a lot of it is like that feeling of like movement through a piece, variation in shapes. Not everything's the same exact sizes and the same exact place or the same exact distance between all the shapes. One time I took a painting to a gallery and it was like of a cove, and I'm like, it's a decent painting. I wasn't like super proud of it, but the gallerist was like, well, look at these shapes. They're all like really similar and they're all really evenly spaced. And I was like, oh, that's true. Do you still want it? But anyway, so I just think like there's just things like that. You learn to see, I think though, more and more as you do it more. There's still things for me that I see other artists that I really admire and I'm like, how do they do that? So you're always learning, and I don't know, it's a matter of like just continuing to look, I guess. And that's for me also where painting from life is important, because it helps me to learn to see better, I guess. And that is a nice thing about oil painting, though, I feel, is that you're kind of always able to move things around. Even if it's dry and you can't manipulate the paint anymore, you can just scrape it back a little bit and paint over it. So you never really have to be too afraid, And actually, that's what I love. If I let myself be free in my painting, that is the best kind of painting for me, because it just feels like, I don't know, you feel kind of like, I don't know what the word is. I don't ever feel like I know exactly what I'm doing when I'm painting. But when I experiment and play around a little bit, then I feel like it just feels exciting and kind of like I've created that, like I did that because I tried this other thing and I was experimenting with it, and I don't know, you kind of get a different touch with your work as you do it more. You have more confidence in it, I guess, maybe, and you have more authority when you put the brush strokes down. And I don't know that it ever feels like, you never feel like invincible, like I could do anything. But it builds your confidence a little bit too as you do it a lot more, because you feel like, oh, I can do it. Like I've succeeded in the past, I could succeed again. I have hopes. So one thing that I've had that I know a lot of students will say is like, I just don't want to mess it up. I don't want to mess up what I did. And Like, you know, they're proud of a certain element or something about it that they like. Or they don't even love it, but they're like, I just don't want to mess up and make it worse, you know? But I'm like, who cares? It's a panel that cost you $10. Like, mess it up, you know? And also, just paint over it if you don't like it. I think for me, that's like the best lesson that I ever learned for myself was to stop caring about messing anything up. Because you did it once, you'll do it again. Like, you can do it again. Like, if you love something about it and you're afraid you're gonna lose it by going back into something to move things around because the overall effect just isn't working, like, just give it up, you know? Give it up. Don't worry about that. You never know, like, what magic is gonna come out of it, so.
You know, your paintings are small, but they really give a feeling of immense space. You know, there's a monumentality to the clouds, but the landscape, it could be, you know, a very, very, very deep space.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's amazing that you don't need these big canvases, if you can do that on
Yeah.
a small space.
Yeah,
They're lovely.
thank you. Yeah, it's, I mean, and you know, it doesn't always, and like, not every composition works at every size, which is interesting too. I mean, I shouldn't say that, but like, if it's a good composition, it could work in a larger size, but sometimes it's also like a matter of like how far you are from the subject matter. So for instance, like if I were to take, like this would work on a large scale really well because I could still have kind of a similar scale, like with what I'm doing. Like it wouldn't have to be, the trees wouldn't have to be like super detailed, you know? I could kind of maintain some of the elements of this on a larger scale. But some pieces, if you did it really big, like even like this, because this is a close up already. Like if I did that really big, I would have to be much more detailed, you know? And that would terrify me because I'm not that good at trees. But I don't know. So but it is true that like you can sometimes condense like a really immense view into a small space. Yeah, just remember, like trying to remember when you're painting this 3D world, you're putting it into a two-dimensional space. Something else that I often do, this has helped me a lot with composition as well, is when I sketch, I actually draw out thumbnails in my sketchbook before I sketch them. And that helps me to be able to place shapes in that two-dimensional space. I'm trying to see if I have anything that's like a little bit bigger that you can see it better, but I have my daughter's drawings in here. Peace. And it says slay, slay, slay. In case anyone needed to know 9-year-old jargon. Anyway, sorry, I'm just gonna show you my daughter's drawings. She's a brilliant artist. Anyway, but just like, I just put in the thumbnails and that helps me to kind of play with the shapes as I'm looking out at the view, because if I just start sketching stuff, I'm gonna end up all like willy-nilly, and who knows, like it's not contained at all. And that's fine if you're just trying to like, try to render something and learn how to paint the tree or learn about these shapes. But if you're trying to create a composition, it's good to put the thumbnails down because that'll help you to be able to visualize what you're actually gonna be doing with it, you know, which is putting it in a two-dimensional space, you know. So that's something that I started doing, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, and it's been a game changer for me. Because when I need help with composition, I always go to my sketchbook and look for my inspiration there. In fact, most of my paintings are painted from, just straight from my sketches. And so I don't necessarily, sometimes I'll have a photo of something in there, but often those are just sketches that I've done when I'm out and about. So even if I don't have a photo, it's okay.
Do you use different size thumbnails in your sketchbook? And then decide which one might work the best?
Yeah. Like if it's a view that I really like and I don't know exactly if it should be a square format or a rectangular format or something, I'll do it in a variety of different proportions, and that way I can kind of pick later. And I try to work on standard sized panels because it's so much easier to frame. But there are times where I'm like, you know what, this needs to be in a non-standard size just for this composition to work. So, you know, if you're trying to take a sketch that you've done in a rectangle and put it in a square, because you're like, oh, but it'll work. It doesn't always work. It's weird, it's like, it doesn't work. So it's always a good idea to sketch it out, in that way beforehand, just to give yourself a real visual of what you're doing. Sometimes even like a round format, and then you got to really figure out how you're going to frame that. Sometimes it's good to have a framing plan in mind ahead of time before you're painting. It just depends. Like, I think for me, that's true when I'm doing non-standard sized things. But I build frames when I have to, but it's a lot of work, so. And like for me, what I'm kind of, like I also like to think about like what's the main idea of the piece? Like what is kind of the main focus of it? Not necessarily focal point, because I don't think of it in those terms. I don't want it to be like all about just one element that everyone's drawn to that one thing, but more like what's the main idea about it compositionally. And so for me with this, I think the thing that like kind of is drawing me into the painting or into the view that I hope the painting will draw me into is kind of like this area, kind of like coming into this and then moving up into the sky. So that being true, I think sometimes also it's a mistake that people make that they think, oh, the stuff in the foreground should be the most detailed because it's the closest to the viewer. But when our eye is seeing something, that's not how our eye focuses at all. Our eye, like in fact, the things that are closest to us are often least detailed unless we're looking right at them. And that's the main idea. If that's the main idea, that's great. You can keep that the most focus. But I try not to have everything be equally important in a painting. So you kind of like, this stuff can be maybe less detailed, or it can be, sometimes you can kind of leave some of that untouched a little bit as you go into a painting. And so it's good to try not to overwork anything all at once, like I was saying before, because you really don't know where you're gonna land. So it's nice to keep it open, like keep the whole painting open as long as possible so that you can kind of decide, oh, that's good. And like, I want this to be a harder edge because I want that to be where people will kind of be drawn into. And then I can kind of create some harder edges here as I go, and the movement. Anyway, so those are just some thoughts that I am having as I'm in it right now. Anyway, I gotta clean my palette off. I'm gonna work in this sky a little bit more, and there's too much green. Like sometimes you can get all the colors to blend in, and it's gonna make a nice, pretty gray. But sometimes too much green is gonna mess you up in the sky. So, start fresh there. You guys can tell me when is a good time for a break. It's totally. How long? Okay, all right.
So Erin, I love what you said about like, you're not gonna mess it up. Like I think growing up, it was very like, don't make a mess.
Yeah.
Kept school, uniform, like all of it. And I was kind of creative, but I was always afraid of paint.
Right.
But then on Instagram, I saw you painting in your car on the way to New Hampshire.
Right. Right. My family loves me, by the way. I was driving and painting. It was amazing. Yeah, my husband was driving. Yeah. I know. You're like, I'm going to paint all of it.
The painting would have to be a postage stamp.
I know, to get it. I know, to capture it, yeah. Yeah.
Interested in, because I would be like, that's a mess.
Right, oh, it can be messy, yes. It's a dangerous thing to do, actually. And I haven't done that in a while, but like I actually have a little setup that I can take in my car as a passenger. It's like a small cigar box one, and I bring a wooden piece of plywood that I put on my lap. I put a towel on my legs, I put the plywood down, and then I have like this little thing, and it has like the little, anyway, just like little everything, like little turpentine thing. It's Gamsol, but, and then I've painted in my car. That is nuts. I don't do that. I haven't done that in forever, but. I know. I know. Right. Right. Yeah. I don't know. I'm trying to think very painstakingly and and I'm sure the whole episode was me yelling at my kids and I don't even know. I can't remember, but it was probably very chaotic. But I feel And it's funny, and I think about things like that. I've done that in the past. I actually have painted in my car a ton of times, just like I'll drive somewhere and park and paint in the car. But I haven't done that in so many years, and I think I did that a lot when my kids were littler and they were in the car, and I was like, okay, I'll do this for 20 minutes and then we'll go. But now it's like I have more time, I can go paint outside and stuff. But I think a lot of it is like, how bad do you really want to do something? Like, are you willing to like put in the effort and make the mess and do the thing, And so I don't know. It's and I don't know if I want it bad enough anymore. I don't know. You get older and you're like, it seems hard.
Well, around that time you inspired me to like put my kids in the car, and
Yeah.
we went to the farm.
That's awesome.
And they were so and so I
Uh-huh.
got in the car.
I know.
And you did, and I looked, I used to look outside, and then the battery died in the car.
Oh my gosh. You're like, thanks, Erin. You should have sent me a message on Instagram and be like, unfollow. This was a terrible idea. No, people have asked me that in the past, like, how have you done this with kids? We have 3 kids, and our oldest will be a senior next year, and our youngest is 9. And so, like, I have started painting right before we adopted our oldest son. So it's like all those years, I've been painting since, like, I've only known painting as a mom, basically. So the word that I always use to describe my parenting method is benign neglect. That's what I call it. I'm like, they are thriving. It's amazing. And I have nothing to do with it. No, I don't know. I think it's, like even tonight, my husband had to like leave work early to go pick up my daughter from gymnastics. And like, she's like, Mom, why do you always do this to me? I hate Dad. Anyway, I'm like, you love your dad. It's going to be fine. And he's like, where do I pick her up? How do I do the thing? But it's like they roll with it. But it is not always easy. And I think a lot of it is carving out that space and time for yourself to learn, whatever stage of life we're in, like seeing that as important, something that.
Send in a card or something?
Yeah.
You ever paint with your children all together?
If they wanted to, I would do it. My daughter likes to do art. My second son, my middle son, is very good at art, but he's now 14 and he's way too cool for that. He has to go to the gym, and get his gains and stuff. So, but he's still an artist. Like I want him to pursue it because he's actually really good. And my daughter is just 9, so she's just all about the art. But they've never really wanted to learn from me. They think my paintings are very boring. They're like, they're all the same, Mom. Like when they'll go to an art show, I'll have them pick out their favorite painting of all the things. And my son, like I remember taking my middle son and he picked out like the zombie painting. I'm like, okay, that's cool. And then I'll ask them like their opinion on stuff and they're like, yeah, they're great. They all look the same. I'm like, thanks guys, thanks a lot. It's kids. I know, it's fine. I'm like resigned to it. I don't take it personally anymore. It's fine.
Yeah.
Anyway, we could take a break and then I need to replenish my paints up here anyway, so I can do that and then, yeah. That happens though, like I'll do demos for classes and then I'll finish them up later and they've changed drastically by the end. And I'm sure all the students are like, you could have shown that on the video. We want to see how you got to that point, I'm actually going to just turn this back on again just to have it open. Just in case.
Have you ever worked in a different medium?
Yeah, like I've, not like on a large scale per se, but I mean, I'll do gouache. I use gouache, I do watercolor, and I do some acrylic. I mean, very little acrylic, I would say. But for gouache, it's more like studies and maybe plein air stuff sometimes. With watercolor, I actually, maybe every now and then I'll do like landscapes or clouds with watercolor, but I like to do like portraits in watercolor. I think that's like really fun to do. Weird, but mostly like of my kids or people that I know, but.
Erin, do you ever do still lifes? Do you have set up a still life?
Very little.
Very little.
So the only still lifes that I've ever really done, let's see, maybe I could find one on here, I'll show you. Actually, I don't know, do we have Wi-Fi in here? I probably can't show it to you if I don't
We
have.
do have Wi-Fi here.
Can I tell you what's wrong?
Do you need me to sign you in?
I know what it is.
Sure. Yeah, if, I mean, I don't have to show you guys, but is it, yeah, yeah, sure, that'd be great.
It's the perk of being the
Yeah.
corresponding secretary is actually given this piece of information.
Secrets.
As a side note, the town has literally never changed its password, and you can use it on various places all over town. Just so nice.
I'm gonna just come to Franklin just to use the Wi-Fi on my laptop, just randomly, you know.
You go with never save, or do you want to save it?
It doesn't matter, no, you don't have to.
Okay, there you go.
All right, thanks. So yeah, I don't do a lot of still life, but like this is just an example of like some still life stuff that I've done, I guess, if anyone wanted to come up and see. So it's some floral things, but I have a collection of Dutch klompen of shoes. I used to live in the Netherlands, and so I have like a vast collection of these things. And so I will photograph them from above and with the shadow and paint them. I think it's fun. I actually want to do another series of those.
Now, are those paintings or are those photographs?
They're paintings.
Oh, they're the paintings, okay.
I
Yeah.
was thinking about your,
I can't make them bigger, so I guess I
your
can.
wanting to paint, you know, from direct observation.
Yeah.
That's one way.
Oh no, for sure. It's
Yeah.
like of all the things that I ever do, painting from observation to get like a real likeness of something, still life, and like figurative work is the best. But anyway,
It's
so
very confining, those still lives in a way. You end up being so detailed. sometimes.
yeah, no, it's true. It's hard for sure.
That's very
Anyway, I'm actually going to the Netherlands to paint again this year in May, and so for about 10 days, and it makes me want to do more little still lifes like that just to get ready for it, you know. So we'll see.
Where in the Netherlands are you going?
A couple places. So when I lived there, I lived in 4 different little towns, and during the time that I was there, and so I'm gonna go back and be just like 2 little towns, one in North Holland and one in South Holland. So one north of Amsterdam, one south of Amsterdam. But I'll be in each place for about 5 days and just be biking and painting. I'm very excited.
So I assume it's warmer weather.
Yeah, it'll be in May, and it'll be busy touristy season, but it'll be nice.
Doing that this summer?
In May, yeah, this year, yeah. I know.
With a group?
So I'm taking my mom and my sister, and 2 of my sister-in-laws for the first half, and then a bunch of my art friends are going to meet me there for the last half. And then I have a few friends in the Netherlands that are artists that are going to meet up and paint with us too. So
What brought you to the Netherlands?
I was a missionary for my church. And so I was there in my early 20s. I've been home for almost 25 years now, but yeah, it was a good experience. I speak Dutch, and I miss it a lot. You don't get to speak Dutch very often out here.
My sister-in-law lives in Den Bosch.
Oh, yeah, that's awesome. Den Bosch. Yeah, that's really cool. I might actually be near Den Bosch at some point while I'm there. So, yeah, I lived mostly in like the Holland provinces, like along the kind of near the coast, and then I lived in Groningen, which is up north, like all the way up north in the country. So, anyway, it's a beautiful country. And honestly, like I think a lot of my inspiration for painting, it came from photographs that I had taken while I lived there. And so,
A lot of your inspiration came from,
well, when I first started painting, I was painting from photographs from my time living there. And so it's a lot of big open skies because it's very flat. And so I think that influenced a lot of my interest in painting skies, to be honest. So I think that was a big part of it.
yeah, I did a bike trip from Amsterdam to Bruges.
Oh, so
And
fun.
the skies were magnificent.
Yeah, it's so beautiful. And it's like right on the water, and so there's just always, the sky's always moving. It's actually really windy there, so you get a lot of movement in the clouds, so that's kind of a cool thing about it. Anyway, I'm excited to go back. I've never painted there. When I lived there, I didn't paint there, so.
So you're going to be painting there for the first time
Yes, yes, I know, I'm very excited. When it's like coming full circle, because that's what I painted when I first started painting, was just from photographs from there. But now I get to go and paint them in real life. It's like 20 years later, 25 years later, you know. So I'm excited.
The materials over there you're painting back.
It's like I have to pack as light as possible, and so I've painted overseas like 4 or 5 different times, and so a lot of it's just trial and error, like just figuring out what's gonna work.
You have to ship the paintings back.
I've never done that, but you can. And so I'll often take like really lightweight panels with me, and I have these panel carriers that I bring wet paintings to and from in. And the paintings usually are dry within a couple days of painting them, and so I can kind of stack some of them up and put them in my suitcase. Yeah, sometimes I'll do it on canvas, or like loose canvas, you know, and then just stack those up, and they're way more lightweight, which is nice. So it just depends. I actually prefer to paint on panels when I'm traveling even still, but yeah, it's a lot of,
Bring an extra suitcase.
yeah. I mean, I try to get away with just one kind of standard suitcase, my bag, that black one, and my carry-on, and that's it. So my plein air setup is really compact, and so it's just like a tripod and like my push-on box and, you know, some of these and my paints, like that right there. That's about it. That's like all I bring with me really for painting. So like this thing, and anyway. So it's a practice in like bringing like one change of clothes basically, and that's all you get. So I don't look good when I do it. I'm not like traveling in Europe in style, that's for sure. But it's so much fun though. It's like there's nothing for me, like nothing more exciting than being able to paint somewhere that's like meaningful to me and beautiful and different, and I don't know, it's exciting. So.
What are you looking for now as you are kind of nearing the end or nearing the stopping point?
Yeah, I'm kind of looking at, like I'll kind of like be squinting at it and looking back and just seeing if it feels balanced to me, you know, where I need to manipulate shapes and move things around. Like right now I'm kind of looking at this because it's the most unfinished little spot, and so I'm kind of thinking, what do I need to do with it? The reason it's not resolved is because I didn't know what to do with it. Still don't really know what to do with it, so I'm going to just go in there and see what I can figure out. Just trying to figure out if, you know, trying to get my values accurate and be as close with color as possible. Just kind of getting a feel for what the shapes are that I want to do over here. Like just kind of, I don't necessarily want to be, I don't want to over-explain anything in my painting. I like things to be more suggestive and things like that. So when I am laying down brushwork at this stage, I'm trying not to be too finicky with it. And so I'll still be using, like I've really painted this whole painting with these 2 brushes, well, minus like the really bad one at the beginning, and then a little bit with this one. But I haven't gone any smaller than these. This is actually maybe even bigger or smaller than I would normally use, like I said before, but I didn't bring a bigger one. So I would probably do most of this painting all with like a larger brush, even at this stage. And then maybe for the last like 10% of the painting, I'll move into some smaller brushes for some finer details in certain areas, you know. But I probably wouldn't get much more detailed than that. So at this stage, I'm not trying to be real specific with my brushwork or anything. I'm just trying to still be suggestive about what the shapes are and how I want, you know, where I want to start and stop those shapes and that kind of thing. So. And recognizing that I do want to have some, like, I guess delineation, or like some of the idea and the feeling of there being like different fields and things. I do kind of want that in there, but I don't want it to be too like detailed, you know? So I'm just kind of trying to see if I can make that happen, but And like I said before, sometimes you kind of hit it right and you're like, okay, that's good, I can keep that there. Other times you're like, no, I'm gonna have to move some of that around later, and it's all good. And like, it's good to have like some variation in, just to give some suggestion of like variation in the trees. Like overall, for the most part at this point, it's all just been like big blocks of value and color and shape. But I will go in at some point and kind of like give a little bit of a suggestion of like separation in the trees, or like in this little spot here, I kind of like that there's, not that you can really see it that well, but there's like some darker clumps in some of those trees, you know, that kind of are interspersed. And so I might do that because like here, I've done that dark one there, that might kind of go away. But like to help lead the eye all kind of into this area, I'm gonna wanna have a little bit more of the detail be in that area. And so that might be something that will come as I like kind of work through.
What do you think you're going to do with the foreground there?
What am I gonna do with it? Is that what you asked? I don't know. What should I do with the foreground? The foreground is always like, often for me is kind of the last thing that I kind of really do. And unless that is the main idea of the piece, that's still going to be one of the less detailed areas anyway. So I don't really like want to think about it yet. I'm not like really like worrying about it, I guess, at this point. I'm kind of keeping it open and loose just to kind of keep my options open there. Maybe at the end I would like go in quickly and just do, you know, so, like if it's already dry, like some kind of layering over that. I don't know. I might try to think about if I want to do anything with it so that it feels like the land is there's more movement there. So I don't know yet. I'm still kind of thinking about that one, but I'm trying to decide what matters most right now for where I'm at in the painting. And so, all right. And then sometimes too, I'll find that like I get to a stage in a piece and something's happening in it that wasn't part of the original idea, or wasn't really in the reference, or wasn't in my mind before, but now there's something about it that kind of feels good. And one thing I like is this feels like, kind of like the clouds are coming down over, like they could be coming down over that little spot, and I kind of like the way that feels, and so I'm gonna see if I can kind of like play with that idea a little bit over here, you know, to kind of like give that misty, kind of a little bit of that misty feeling to it, you know? And maybe allowing that to like come down into like other parts, like maybe here. I don't know. I'm thinking about it. And some of those elements can kind of come in after you've let something dry a little bit as well. You can go back in and do more glazing in certain spots if you want to get some of those effects that are harder to get in an alla prima or more in like a direct style of painting. Sometimes you need to kind of like let things dry so you can do some of those indirect things with it. So sometimes that's where I'll kind of stop on a painting where I'm like, okay, I got it to where I can do it, you know, where I feel confident in it, you know, and now I need to kind of let it sit and percolate and dry a little bit before I go back into it and, you know, make more changes or whatever. And I'm still kind of trying to decide with this cloud shape, like, if I want it to kind of fade away a little bit as it goes up, or if I want it to be like kind of like more pronounced, kind of like it's going off, but it's still like a really bold like shape going off thing. I don't know. So I'm just gonna leave it like that for now, and then I'll look at it later. And sometimes you can't really tell what you need to do until you just try something different. You make it, you just do the other thing, and then you're like, okay, that worked, or no, that did not work, and I'll scrape it back and I'll put it back the way it was. Sometimes what I can do, if it's a really big painting, and it would be a lot of back and forth with the piece like that, sometimes I will photograph it, and then I'll do something like this with it. You know, I'll take it and manipulate it digitally a little bit, and like give myself some different ideas for what I could do compositionally. like moving shapes or moving things around or changing the values and things like that. And that can help me know, that looks good. Maybe it will look good if I do it on the painting, and then I can try it, you know. So those are some methods that I've used in the past.
Do you ever use the app Procreate? Like, do you have it?
No, but I know that it's really a good tool.
Yeah.
I'm really cheap. I use Paint. It's free on my phone, on my
I was
computer.
thinking if you do have like an iPad, right, or something like that, and you're on the go,
Yeah.
you can take a picture of it, bring it into there. And
Yeah. I know I have a lot of art friends that use Procreate for like, mostly like figurative artist friends of mine that use it for like manipulating photos, like photo shoots and stuff that they do so that they can like get good compositions. But I'm an Android person and I don't have any iPhone anything. Which I think is like an anomaly in the world these days.
I'll bring you on Saturday. Yeah.
So one thing I was saying before about like this kind of being the area of interest in my mind for this piece, I think because of that, I really want to bring some interest into this cloud area. And so for me, a way to do that is to bring like some of the highlighted clouds into that spot. And so, so that's kind of like where I might mess around with that for a little bit and see what happens. But, and that might mean that this shape will become more muted as, you know, maybe. We'll see. And you can see I still kind of scrape back a lot. And I'm doing this still at this stage because I'm still not like 100% settled on where every little thing is. And sometimes this will go on for me until the bitter end. Like it'll just be like, okay, it's, you know, I still haven't like found it, you know. And so I'm still playing around with it. And I actually really love that the effect that it gives to the painting though, because it creates all these different pathways that I kind of started and stopped. And I guess for me personally, it does feel like that creates movement in the sky, which you aren't really seeing any movement when you're looking at a painting, but you can get the feeling of the movement because you're seeing all those nuanced layers in the sky and like that atmosphere. Yeah, like I just think that can kind of create that feeling, I guess, in the piece. But to me, that also is a result of like a lot of like trial and error in the painting. So, you know, and so in my mind, those are good things, I guess. Instead of seeing those as not a good thing, or as like a lack of mastery, because I think I used to think that way. I used to think, oh, if you've really mastered it, you can just create it instantly, you know, like you can create, the first pass is going to be the right one, you know. But I don't know. Yeah, but it just seems to me like this is also part of the artistic process, is just, you know, putting the paint down and manipulating it in different ways. And that to me is also like the signature of the artists themselves, you know, of how they process what they're seeing and that kind of thing. So, I mean, granted, I think that as time goes on, for any artist, they're going to become more proficient and they're going to be more confident, but I don't think it ever takes away from the fact that they still need to be curious, you know, and trying things. And
Well, it makes it interesting. It was just cookie cutter.
absolutely. Like, why would we keep doing it? You know, if you could master something, why would you even keep going? It's like a half of the reason I think we continue to pursue it is because it's like it's a challenge and it's causing you to learn new things and try new things, and it's like it's not a race, you know. So.
You ever go to Ireland?
Not yet. My name is Erin. I should have been there by now.
Yeah, they have lots of pastorals.
I know. I know. I want to go to Ireland really bad, actually.
Cotswold, England, yeah.
I've been there. I have painted in the Cotswolds. They're almost too pretty, though. They're really hard to paint, to be honest with you. I found it to be very challenging to paint in the Cotswolds. It's too perfect. Like, it's too much, but it was really beautiful. But yeah, I would love to go to Ireland. I want to go to Scotland too. Well, I painted in England 3 times, and my favorite trip that I ever did there was actually with my parents. And I went with them on I have a lot of family history from England, and my dad's done a ton of stuff there, or just like I've done a ton of research, and like there's all these like folklore stories of like my great grandpa when he came over, and anyway, so we went there and found all these places, and I just painted my way through all of these like family history places, and it was just awesome. I don't know, I gotta go back there and do that.
What country was that?
In England.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So that was very cool. That like they're all from like Lincolnshire, like Norfolk area, kind of the flat lands of like northeast of London area. But it was so beautiful. Yeah, very flat. I mean, we went to a lot of different places, but that was kind of like where a lot of the family were from. But it was beautiful. So.
Do you ever paint multiple paintings at the same time?
Yeah,
Since you say you're a
like
fast
this. I'm just kidding.
Since you're a fast painter.
Yeah. I mean, I often have like multiple paintings going at the same time. It really depends on what I have going on. Like, if I have a show coming up that I'm painting for, then yeah, I'll have paintings on like multiple easels in my studio and stuff. But I guess for the most part, I'm probably just like doing the one. Well, often I'll do the one, I set it aside, I put another one up, and then I bring that one back up and that kind of thing. But yeah, I guess I do work that way a lot because I am letting things kind of like sit for a while,
I'm not a painter, but it seems if I would have a hard time saying, when am I done?
I know.
When do you
Well,
stop?
that's a good question.
Big question.
Once you stop, then
We
the
do
next
the
day you
answer to
start.
that.
The thing that's so cool about that is like, I know, I should have stopped a long time ago. I think for me it's like, I feel like it's, yeah, sometimes you just have to like, yeah, stop. Yes. Yeah, I get bored, which is so sad to say. It's like I should never say that out loud. I'm like, I just get bored of painting. I'm like, I'm tired of this. Not bored isn't the right word. Or I just like lose the ability to like see anything else or like to see what else needs to be done. And so I actually think that is a wise time to take a break because you're not going to make good choices when you feel that way. And so I think for me, it's a good time to step away and like go take a nap for a while. I take a lot of naps, you guys. It's really bad.
I guess that's kind of true when I edit the photos. I have to walk away if I'm being tense.
Yeah.
Because I'm making a hard edge.
Uh-huh. No, it's very true.
I practiced watercolor for 15 years now, and I answered my own questions. The instructor will say, "You're done," because and what I don't know. I did watercolor. It's like you just overdo it and like stop. It's perfect. Don't put another ounce of paint on that page. So the instructors has helped me more. When I do a painting, I don't finish it in class. I usually do because I'm a fast painter as well. But I put it on an easel in my dining room, so I can, when I'm walking through the kitchen, I see it. And then sometimes then I'll say, yes, it's done, or it just needs a little bit more. So I think stepping away is important. to me.
Absolutely.
I don't know about everybody else.
For sure.
Yeah, having some separation between you and your work is really a good idea sometimes.
What do you like about Naples yellow?
It's a cool yellow, and so it's almost like the split palette, you know, where often artists will have like a warm and a cool of each color, of each primary. And so I actually don't have really any red on my palette except burnt sienna. But you'll see I don't have a lot of red in my paintings. If I'm painting something that I need red for, I would use alizarin crimson. But I like, it's a really, like yellow ochre is also a cool yellow. So you could use that. But I find the Naples yellow is such a subtle yellow for mixing and finding, like for graying down some of the other saturated primaries, like ultramarine blue. It'll mute it really beautifully. Like another color that I'll use a lot to make like a purple is ultramarine blue and cadmium orange. Makes like a beautiful purple. Like a really, really beautiful purple. Let's see, I'll just put it on there. Anyway, it's like a really kind of quiet purple. Anyway, so I just like it for the mixing quality that it has, and it's a cool yellow, so it doesn't, like for instance, if I want to lighten something up, but I don't want it to get too warm, I can use that as a way to lighten it up. I mean, obviously white, but like if I'm trying to like lighten up a green, but I don't want it to get too warm, I can use the Naples yellow, so.
So are those fields that are kind of coolish looking?
These actually, I've used cerulean blue to get to that. These right here?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's like, so I find if you're trying to paint like really saturated greens, like vibrant greens like you would see in like springtime or like in Ireland, I guess, you need to use like a cerulean or a phthalo, like just a little bit of it to get that saturated green out of it. Otherwise, you're gonna end up with more like this. It's not as cool. It's hard to get to that tone without it. So I do use cerulean blue for some of those more saturated greens that I'm looking for.
Was the Naples yellow?
No, I'm trying to think what I've mixed this one with. So let's see. So probably cadmium. This is what I used, cadmium on this one, cadmium yellow. But you could use the Naples yellow. It makes it like a little lighter, like that. So it's lighter, you know, all of those things. So anyway. I'm trying to think if it was me at home in my studio, like what else I'd be doing to this right now. And since I'm here, I have to do something else to it, so let's see. Honestly, there's times where I will walk away in my studio, but then I'll tell myself, just go for 5 more minutes and see what you can figure out, you know? And then and then I'm really glad that I did it, because I'm like, okay, I made some progress here, you know, I did good. I'm very proud of myself.
Well, it's up to you, we can go until 8:30.
Okay, yeah. No, I'm good.
It's a studio.
No, this is good. It's good for me. Like, I mean, it's like with it, as an artist anywhere, you have to step back and like ask yourself all those questions, you know, like what else do I need to do? And I think for me, a lot of it for me at this stage is just, like, I'm happy with the overall composition of the piece, but I think there's lots of little tweaking that I would personally want to do to like get it to really feel like poetry, you know, to get it to really feel like it's got that emphasis that I want it to have. It's got all the movement that I want. There's nothing that's really like distracting from that about it. And so there's going to be little loose ends all over the place, you know. And so it's good to step back and try to make those decisions of what those loose ends are and how to resolve them and that kind of thing, without losing the overall composition. And sometimes you will lose it when you're messing around, you know, and changing things and doing things. And so you have to kind of make lots of little micro decisions. I always think that that's like a huge part of what being an artist is like all those little micro decisions. And this is something I'll tell students, like when we're doing plein air classes and things like that, is like they'll say, what should I do? What do I need to do next? And I'm like, well, what do you think it needs? You know, so then they kind of analyze it. And then I'll say, well, I could tell you what I would do, but I might do I could do 4 different things at this point, you know, that might change the composition or make it stronger or whatever. And every one of those will lead to it being a different painting. But that's, to me, like what's so beautiful about it is like, then you're gonna make one painting today, and then tomorrow you're gonna make a totally different one. Or maybe it's like the same subject, but it's gonna be different. Or you could make this one, but you have no idea like all the other options. There's so many possibilities with every painting, you know, when you first start it. So I guess to me, there's no one thing that's gonna make this painting amazing, you know. So for me, it's a lot of it is just these little micro decisions and trying it out and then seeing where it leads me, you know. And
So Erin, your clouds are always so nice. Really pretty.
thank you.
When you talked about sometimes at the beginning, they would look like rocks, right? Like,
Yeah.
So, like here, you're at such a nice stage. So,
Yeah.
when I'm thinking of this nice stage, and then I'm like, oh, but the sun hits it beautifully there, and you get this like wisp of highlight.
Yeah.
And you do that. and
Yeah.
It's like, gum, 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 you know? Like,
Yeah,
can you
I do.
give, like, color recipe marks, inkling on how do you get it so wispy and with this elan that feels like a wispy cloud nice and not like that I can yarn on it or something. Do you know what I
Right, yeah, I know. I mean, there's so many, like, so you've seen me do a lot of scraping back of a lot of the stuff that I've laid down. So I'll lay down, you know, ideas and shapes and, you know, values and things like that. And then I'll scrape it back. And it's not even, I'm not necessarily trying to like get rid of what I did, but I'm just trying to like it kind of smooths out the edges a little bit, and it makes it so that it knocks back that surface so that I'm not beholden to any of that texture. It's not locking me in to like that idea, what I already put down. And so it allows me to continue to move things around until I feel like I've manipulated that shape in a way that it feels right. And so maybe that's part of what creates some of that wispiness and the softness that you find in clouds. But then you can go in and you can put down some new hard edges, because there are going to be some hard edges, like hardish edges in clouds, sometimes extremely hard edges, you know, where like this painting here has like a really hard edge, like where it hits that one spot, you know, where it hits the sky. And so you'll get that in clouds, you know, at times, but you don't want the whole thing to feel like that, you know. So I think a lot of it is, yeah, being willing to not have every single element be in focus, you know, thinking of like what's the main focus that you want to have on those cloud shapes, and then being willing to like let go of some of the rest of it and not having it be so perfect or so outlined, and like you can't always tell where it starts and stops, you know. You kind of like leave some of that nuance there, you know, you leave some of the mystery, I guess, and then kind of work out just details in certain little areas, you know. And so sometimes later in a painting, I'll get down to like a brush like this size on a painting like this big, but it's not to put in like rendering details, but it's more just to put in like those little tiny touches that are just gonna make that tiny bit of difference to the overall effect of something, you know. So I don't know, does that answer your question at all? I don't know. Yeah, edges is, I do think that is, every artist has kind of their own signature way of doing their edges, you know, and I still feel like I'm learning so much about that, and I want mine to be better and different all the time, you know. So I don't know, I think it's like a constant learning curve, you know, of trying to figure out where that is. And the good thing something to remember with clouds too is there are layers in clouds, there's perspective in clouds, like in the sky. I'll often have people, you know, ask questions about that. And like, for instance, like when you think of perspective in the foreground, we all kind of like understand the concepts of like it, you know, recedes to this point in the back at the horizon. But the same exact thing holds true for the sky. And so where you're standing here, like these clouds are closer to the viewer than these clouds. Like these clouds are closer to are at the horizon, you know. And so these clouds are going to be, like in perspective, just kind of remembering that these are proceeding towards the viewer. And so that can kind of help you to kind of visualize the layering of things too, and where you're placing things, and I don't know. I mean, sometimes you compress things and flatten them a little bit for the painting's sake, but just to get like whole shapes in there, you know? But I think if you really want to like have that feeling, like this painting here, maybe some of you can't see that one back there, but like you get the sense that the clouds are in perspective, you know, like they're moving up and away from the viewer, kind of out, just like the land would be doing. And so you kind of want to remember that as you're working with the sky. Instead of everything just being kind of like flat in front of you, just remembering that it's actually going like this, you know. I don't know if that helps, but. And like, honestly, like I can already tell with this painting, the part that's going to like consume my energy is going to be this thing here. And so that's something that I'll probably have to like let it sit and like think about the placement of things and like where it's gonna go. Often if I know I'm gonna go back into a painting, I will definitely like scrape back a lot of the texture. Some of it I'll leave because I'm not worried about it like interfering with going forward with it, but I'll scrape back some areas where I'm like, I'm not sure if that's where I'm gonna keep that, you know? So that way when I come back into it later, I'm not fighting against that texture.
Are you gonna eventually put the cows in?
Oh yeah, I will. I'll put like the suggestion of them like right here probably. I'll probably wait until it's dry, you know, and then I'll kind of put them in and scrape them back and put them in and scrape them back and put them in again. Because they'll look like blobs of nothing for a while. And then you kind of like refine things and do the negative space, you know, paint around the negative space anyway. So that's what I'll do with those. Yeah, I think so. Because I think that would give it just the right like perspective and like the proportion, you know. It would help to kind of ground the painting, and then more little details would probably get put in as well, like as I go on with it. I mean, it's definitely, I would say it's like 3 sessions from being done, but it's like a start, right? So anyway, there you go. It's a good start. Thank you.
This program was made possible by your Franklin friends and neighbors, good folks just like you. Thanks for supporting Franklin TV. And thanks for watching.